I'm making a lasagna. Ugh, I am disgusting today. And welcome back to part 2 of this Final Fantasy VI breakdown. This is part 2, like I said. Anyway, we're back. So here's the skinny Pete. After the fade to black, Bonanza wakes up to find herself in some strange old man's house. If you just sit there, nothing happens, and you remember the lesson you learned early on in part 1, that nothing happening is probably your cue to use the controller thing in your hands to move. And lo! The babies sing, for you are correct in your assumption. So you move closer to the old man who's just staring at you, and you talk to him, because you're not a weird person. So you move over and you talk to him. Question mark face speaks for the first time and asks where she is, and then stumbles a bit. And then the old man, who I'm just gonna call Old Man, tells her that, hey, I removed your slave crown, and that explains why Lady can talk. Unfortunately, this has resulted in what Shakespeare called thine oldest JRPG trope in yonder scroll. In other words, amnesia. But given that I've said Final Fantasy VI is one of the most perfect openings ever, just take my word and just assume that the amnesia works in the overall plot and isn't just some cheap narrative cop-out. This is my video! I can do it! In order to further highlight how important this woman is, the screen goes black and introduces her as a mysterious young woman, controlled by the Empire, and born with the gift of magic. You then have the opportunity to name her. It's always a good laugh to act like a 5-year-old and name a character Butts, but for the sake of propriety, and because I declared this as one of the most perfect beginnings to a game ever, let's just say you go with her default name, Terra. Now, you might be thinking, we don't know much about Terra at this point, seeing as she had a slave crown on her head and was being forced to massacre the people of Narshe. However, we do know that she can do magic and that she has amnesia, so we know her capabilities and limitations, and that her capabilities make her unique in this universe. We also know that Terra is going to be the lens through which we see most of the game, because she's been made what is referred to as a fish out of water. In storytelling terms, this means she doesn't know much of what's going on, putting her in the exact same position as the player. This will require people to explain things to her, and by extension to the player, in order to bring her and the player up to speed on various situations. Interrupting this odd scenario of a young woman waking up in an old man's only bed, the guards come to the door after being alerted by their lobos that the girl is within. The old man, for unknown reasons, says something along the lines of, "You're our only hope," and tells her to run out the back door while he holds off the soldiers, and to, escape through the mines. So, you go through the mines, and this is really your first opportunity to test your non-Magitech skills. These are your first actual fights. They're still really easy and everything dies in one hit, but you no longer have the comfort of knowing that you're in an invincible Magitech suit. The enemies you encounter here are all weak and die in 1 or 2 hits, giving you another chance to experiment with abilities while you flee from the town guard. You also discover that chests will be in this game, and that opening said chests will give you items. However, Old Man can't keep the guards out of the cave forever. They eventually corner Terra in a corner of the cave. Just when it looks like they'll get her, the ground collapses under her and she falls into a pit, landing injured and fading from the conscious world. The player is then treated to a flashback in which we see a character named Kefka, laughing and gloating and placing a slave crown on Terra. This immediately tells the player everything they need to know about Kefka. He uses slave crowns, so players know he's with the bad guys. He delights in enslaving/owning people, so we know that not only is he with the bad guys, but he revels in evil. This is made even more apparent when he orders her to kill several soldiers and then cackles with pleasure. Then, wait for it, I'm gonna blow your mind! Remember the very beginning? Remember when I told you to remember that steampunk castle? Show a cool steampunk castle while describing people who want to
enslave the world.
Remember that part, cause it's gonna come back again later! Well, we see it again in this flashback. Those people who want to enslave the world are the Empire, Kefka, and Gestapo, the Emperor. Square set that scene up so players would see the castle in the beginning, associate it with the ominous, terrible things, and then have it pay off later with this flashback. Bamboozlingly brilliant. Part 6. Lock, gameplay mix-up, and the real escape. Okay. Calming down, we now see a new character enter the story back at Old Man's house. Old Man, for some reason, is fine after holding off guards and is not arrested or anything. Old Man starts things off with this new character by asking innocently how all the robbing and plundering is gone. Screen then does an awesome freeze frame over the new character, whose default name is Locke, in a freaked out expression. Also, Locke's character introduction makes him sound kind of like Indiana Jones, which is always a plus. Just to be clear, the game has now drawn comparisons to both Star Wars and Indiana Jones, and those can only be counted as points in its favor. The two characters have a back and forth, and Old Man tells Locke that there's a girl that he wants him to meet. Despite sounding like an attempt to put Locke on a blind date with his granddaughter, Locke immediately jumps to the conclusion that it has something to do with, and I quote, "that Magitech riding Imperial Witch! Exclamation mark! Exclamation mark! Exclamation mark!" Which seems like a very strong, sudden thing to just say. But after a brief argument, Old Man manages to convince Locke to go help Tara, albeit seemingly with a degree of reluctance. Locke, without any regard for his safety, dives down the hole where she fell down like a bouse. He finds her unconscious just as a stream of guards enters the far side of that chamber of the mines. As the soldiers begin making their way through the veritable McDonald's playground of a maze, a large group of Muggles arrive from the opposite end of the cavern and offer Locke their aid. As this part seems to be a bit confusing, the game offers you advice on how to control the different groups of Muggles and Locke, and tasks you with defending Tara by strategically positioning the three groups in the passageways and defeating the guard in charge of the search party. This provides a nice change of pace to the straightforward battles that have occurred thus far, and promises that there will be gameplay variety in future segments of the game as well. It is also during this scene we learn Locke has different abilities than Tara, or the soldiers did earlier. Instead of magic, Locke can put his thief treasure hunting skills to work to steal items from enemies. Also, holy shit moly! Did you see what that Moogle did to that mammoth thing? Yeah, it just fell through the floor and disappeared from existence. That's pretty freaking cool. So there's a bunch of fighting, and following the defeat of the leader of the town guard, who's your second boss battle, Locke thanks the Muggles and rushes Tara away to a secret exit from the mines. One thing that is significant about this part is that we see Locke run incredibly fast, and at least at double the speed we were walking before. Remember this, because it comes back again later! Tara wakes up and explains to Stupid Pants McGee, Locke, that she has amnesia. Basically just repeating what Old Man already explained to Locke previously. Despite his initial reluctance with Old Man, Locke pledges his undying loyalty to Tara, possibly because she's pretty, or because he's finally convinced that she really does have amnesia, or because he's just trusting to a fault. Then, clearly in a daze of having killed town guards and carrying a beautiful lady, Locke points out the obvious and explains that this is a secret entrance to the mines and it could be useful someday. Gee, Locke, you think? It might be useful to remember a secret passageway into a plot-important location? I poked fun at it, but this line of dialogue is specifically for the player as a cue of saying, hey, remember this location for later so you don't break a controller in frustration, not knowing where to go. Tara responds to this statement merely by staring at Locke in confused silence and blinking several times really quickly, trying to wrap her brain around the incredibly obvious thing you just pointed out. Part 7. Edgar, the best ladies' man. The pair escape Narshe and make their way south towards Castle Figaro, to which Old Man directed them. On the way, there are more random battles, which teach the player that random battles will occur on the world map as well as in certain areas like mines. A particularly observant player will notice that there is a little mini-map with white dots that appear to represent location. The player will make their way towards the white dot that lies to the south of Narshe on the map, which does indeed turn out to be Castle Figaro! Upon arriving at the castle, Locke walks right in without being hassled by the guards and is immediately able to talk to the king. Without saying anything, the king gives Tara the once-over, head-to-toes and back-up look, prompting Tara to ask, "Who do you think you are?" To which the man replies with a finger wag and a self-admonishment for turning his back on the lady. The game then introduces the king, default name Edgar, not something dumb like cat butts, a young king, an ally of the emperor, and a master mechanic, of which we don't really see much evidence. Yet! Locke interjects and implies that Tara should be surprised that a low-life, reputable treasure hunter like him knows the king, after which he and the king have an amusing, self-congratulatory head-bobbing match, I guess. A part of this scene that always makes me laugh is the part where Tara asks Edgar, why are you helping me? Is it because of my abilities? To which Edgar cheekily replies, I'll give you 3 reasons. First of all, your beauty has captivated me. Second, I'm dying to know if I'm your type. I guess your abilities would rate a distant third. Tara responds to this statement with incredulous silence and then asks, What's your problem? What's your deal? To which Edgar just mutters to himself and then walks away. At this point, the game gives you a bit of breathing space. Without any direction other than being told you have free range of the campground and talk to NPCs in typical find the person who advances the RPG plot fashion. Oh, and at this point you remember that back in Narshe when you saw Locke moving really fast, right? Well, guess what? You're tired of being slow, broken down jalapeno, and you want to be fast. You know Locke could do it, so how do you stare at the controller and start filling with buttons and directional pad and merciful melons running at the speed of sound, boom! And the game just taught you how to play without giving you a dumb info pop-up.
That's amazing!
After talking with an old woman in the western part of the castle, you're treated to a flashback of Edgar and his twin brother, who's highlighted on the screen. His default name is Sabin. Sabin? Whatever! You see Edgar and Sabin discuss their father's deadly illness, and Sabin demonstrates a painful lack of recognition of their father's condition. So, the old woman recalls that the kingship was decided with the flip of a coin, because that's how good, stable governments are decided with coin flips. And Sabin ran away rather than become king, leaving the kingdom to his brother Edgar. With that set up, Terra returns to the throne room, only for Kefka to arrive in the flesh. We're shown more of Kefka's vindictive nature as he makes soldiers clean sand off his boots in the middle of a desert as he laughs and calls them names. We also know how terrible Kefka is at lying. He tells Edgar that they're looking for a girl of no importance. Really? Then why is someone important looking for her in the middle of a desert that's been established as really inconvenient to get to? Oh, and people are lying about a witch? And the reason you're looking for this person who's not important is because she stole something that wasn't important? For a bad guy? You're really bad at lying, Kefka! So Edgar lies right back in Kefka's face and tells him that there are just so many girls in Figaro Castle that he can't keep track of them all. Well, really, Edgar? Where were they? Because we just walked around the castle. The only two women we saw were an old woman that we talked to and a little girl. And I suppose some of the guards could be ladies. It's kind of hard to tell, but... Anyway, as Kesha leaves, he makes a passive threat that Figaro will suffer if Edgar is lying.
Part 8. Foreshadowing, and the second...
Third?
Escape.
At this point, there are 3 setups that have occurred that the player is at least subconsciously expecting will pay off on some level. First, we're thinking that Sabin, Edgar's twin brother, will reappear at some point. I mean, we gave him a name, we saw him, we were explained that he's important. Second, the audience is expecting that Kefka's threat will come to fruition. And then third, although this isn't directly stated, if you talk with a couple of the guards, chances are one of them will say something about Castle Figaro being the most technologically advanced castle in the world, which would seem to support Edgar's introduction as a brilliant mechanical person thing. This statement can be a bit mystifying at the time, especially since you don't see any machinery outside of the numerous fans that line the outside towers, which makes sense because the castle is in the middle of a desert. It'd be kind of hot. But this mysterious lack of machinery is something that the game needs to give closure to, and can actually detract from the larger narrative if it's never mentioned again, because it cheapens the setting. Luckily, the game ain't no tadpole. This here's Final Fantasy VI, so remember these 3 things, because they come back again later. Following Edgar's conversation with Kesha, he makes his way back to the throne room and talks to Locke outside, where Locke observes that Kefka is kind of crazy, to which Edgar replies with ellipses. One of the things that's just great about this game is how well it makes use of ellipses and silences. Instead of having Edgar say, well, I'm worried about his threat, / Terra's safety, / whatever stupid thing would be in a poorly written AAA modern title, Edgar just says nothing, and still effectively conveys the tone of his response to the player. The group breaks up for the night, with Edgar saying he needs to plan strategy with his Chancellor, and the player guides Terra to her bed, where Locke gives more insight into Edgar's personality and his true allegiance to the resistance group known as the Returners. This confuses the amnesiac Terra, who can't tell if she's an Imperial soldier like the guards in Narshe accused her of being, or if she should be allied with the Returners. Locke, unsure of what to do or say, tells her that he really has no idea what she should do, and she has to figure that out for herself. This is actually really refreshing to see, especially given the strain of sexism in many otherwise reputable game series. Terra is given what is known as agency in the story, meaning that she can make her own decisions rather than being coerced, forced, or passively accepting decisions from other, usually male characters. The following sequence occurs during the night, as everyone's asleep. Edgar awakens to find his castle going up in flames. In confusion, he dashes outside to meet Kefka, who, surprise, surprise, has set fire to his castle and returned to take Terra for the Empire. Ding! 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 This is one of the payoffs! Instead of giving in, Edgar tells one of the nearby soldiers to get ready, and then jumps off the parapets of the castle onto some chocobos in a daring escape along with Locke and Terra. While Kefka taunts him for leaving his people, the entire freaking castle begins to collapse together and sinks into the desert as a submarine. Yeah! It's a submarine castle! a sub-Sahara castle. I guess Figaro Castle was pretty advanced. Ding ding! Second payoff! As the trio flees from Kefka, two Magitech armored soldiers pursue them and force a battle. This is when we discover how awesome Edgar is. Not for nothing is he called in his introduction a skilled mechanical engineer. He uses the ability Tools, which separates him from other primates of the... Oh wait, I'm reading the wrong thing. The one tool ability Edgar can initially use is Auto Crossbow, which causes him to whip out a massive crossbow that is as large as his body, and then fire a barrage of crossbow bolts at everything for massive damage. Super cool! Also, if you have Terra use magic, and why wouldn't you, because it's a boss battle, both Edgar and Locke freak out over seeing magic for the first time, further establishing that Terra is super unique in the world of Final Fantasy VI, and that she is way better at composing herself in the heat of the moment.
It was the heat of the moment, telling me what my heart meant.
Than the two men, who literally swoon over Terra's use of magic before the fight is even over. Yeah. Following the battles, Kefka impotently watches as the three heroes ride off into the sunrise and utters one of the best curses of all video games ever. Son of a submariner! At this point, while it doesn't really fit because submarine is it's like Latin for below water, so it's not really a submarine, I guess. But whatever, it's still a great curse out thing. At this point, part 2 of the series is getting a bit long, so we'll finish up this detailed look at Final Fantasy VI's beginning in part 3. You stay classy.
Oh, my lasagna's burning! No!
La da da dee da da do.
Oh, hi there. If you enjoyed the music in this video, great! Be sure to head over to ocremix.org for more great music and awesome scintillating tunes, because they make good music and they give it away for free for some reason. So go there.